Yeah, and it was just drip. Yeah, you'd go up there on like moisture days like this, it would probably be soaking wet inside there. Now, even with no water in there, it would just be dripping, because they built it like so insulated, Yeah.
So the issue with treated lumber is typically arsenic.
Yeah.
And did they test for arsenic in the well water?
I don't know. No, I don't think they did on that because we had to pay for some of this testing. We had to pay the last testing and that. That was almost $200 we had to pay out of our own pocket. And what they test for, they don't test for nothing bad. They just test for the simplest stuff there is. That's why all them standards should be changed. Because all this well stuff, all this stuff that they're drilling with is in the water, but they're not testing for none of that stuff.
Ask him about his royalty checks.
Yeah.
How much and what he's paying for water. He's got to buy drinking water.
Yeah, the guy come today, because I said something to him today. Well, it's Dean's water out of Washington. Well, they was paying for the drinking water up until October of 2009, and then
with the water buffalo.
Well, yeah, they've been paying for that. They never stopped that.
Okay. You still have the water buffalo?
Yeah, the water buffalo is still there, but they've been fighting with me. They says
bought a water dispenser.
Yeah, we had yeah. For
The
drinking.
The jugs for drinking water.
Yeah.
The water dispensers. That's what he has in his house.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've had that we've had the drinking water out of them fountains since January of 2008.
And you're paying for all that?
Well, we wasn't paying for it up until October of 2009. Then Dominion sent us a letter saying, we're canceling your drinking water. Because DEP said your water was fine to drink, but it ain't fine to drink. So we've been paying for our own drinking water since October of 2009. And I got the letter on it that they sent out to us. It said, we're canceling your drinking water because DEP says your water's fine. But it ain't fit to drink, You can't drink it. It tastes like putting salt in a glass of water and drinking it. That's what it tastes like, I drank about that much one time, and that's all I ever drank. We haven't drank our water on our property since January of 2008. And we didn't have an issue with water before they come there, But their thing is, you have to prove it. You have to prove it. You better get a good attorney. That's all. That's what they say to you. All these smart remarks and that.
Dennis, tell him what your attorney tells you.
Oh,
how much an hour?
Yeah. He finally dropped me in that. I'd call and say, he says, well, I get $350 an hour. I said, I only made $500 on this month's check, so I can only talk to you about an hour and a half at the most, and that was his smart remarks, And then, so he sent me a letter, a couple months ago here, about a month and a half ago. He says, since we haven't been talking with you and that, we're going to drop you. If you don't pick up your papers and that within 14 days, we're going to destroy them all. And he knows what's going on, but he never did nothing. Everything he did was to benefit him, because we gave him he got about $5,000 to $6,000 off us and never did nothing to help us. He wasn't even in court when we was in court. We went to court by ourselves at time. So he was useless. He was useless for us. But he sent us a letter saying, you can pick up your files because we haven't had no contact for a while. Because he talked with Dominion more than I did. And every time he talked to him, he caused more trouble. He sided with them.
Tell him what happened when I had you go public and you made the front page of the OR.
Oh, yeah, he talked right to Dominion like that, Yeah, he talked to Dominion like that.
And what DEP did when they came.
Oh, yeah, DEP, that was right around in October of 2009. They brought a paper. He didn't show me the paper, but he says, I want you to sign off on this, all damages and releases that Dominion has done to you.
Your lawyer said that?
No, DEP. Said this. Okay. He says, I want you to sign off on all these damages and that. He said, I'll give you till dinner time tomorrow. I said, I ain't signing off on that. He had a thing that said like $7,500 to sign off on it. I said, I lost more than that in cattle. And I said, we don't have no water on our farm, and I'm going to sign off on that? He said, well, I'm having a rough day. He says, because a bunch of us are getting laid off, but he didn't get laid off. I said, I don't care. I said, I got more problems than you got. But that's what DEP did. And then that's when all that water issue started. Then I called his office in Harrisburg and said, hey, I said, who can I talk to about these gas companies ruining people's properties and their water? I said, what's this Water Act supposed to do? I said, they ruined my water, and I said, I don't have nothing. And then that's when I sent them papers to Harrisburg, and they said, well, by first of the year, they're going to take the water buffalo off of you if you don't get these water samples in. So I sent the water samples to them, and then I started talking more about it, about DEP, what DEP did and what Dominion, to everybody else, talked to That time down Mount Morris, I talked to this one, talked to that one. The water buffalo is still there, but they kept threatening me. We're letting Dominion take the water buffalo off of you. That's what DEP would say. Well, they're taking the water buffalo off of you. And every time they said that, when they was out the house, I said, you are putting me out of business when you take that water buffalo off me because you took all my water off my farm. You know? So the water buffalo is still there. Now, about 2 weeks ago, they called and said, we're done with you. And they don't say Dominion no more. They say Consul. You know, because that's who bought them. They said, we're done with you. So I said, the water buffalo is still there, so I don't know what they're going to do next. I don't know what their trickery is. You know, they're going to do something. You know.
Consul said they were done with you.
Yeah.
Do you know what they meant by that?
Well, DEP. He said DEP signed off on everything. You know, like my fields, my hay fields, which I lost 6 acres of hay fields. I lost about 1.5 acres of pasture, which it is property that I can never use again. And I used this property up until they come on the property, and then they just ruined it all. You know, it was my hay fields and that. You know, and they're useless, and they'll never be any good. They hauled over 200 tandem and tracks of loads of stone on to build a road, because I used to hear that from that Dominion guy. He said, well, we spent $100,000 to put a road in on your property. I said, you shouldn't have put the road on my property, and you should have stayed off my property. I said, and you wouldn't have had that problem, you know. But that was his smart remarks in that. You know, oh, we spent $100,000 for a road on your property. And then he told my wife, he says, we put a road on your property. There's a road you can use. She says, them cattle can't eat hay off of that road, and we can't bale any hay off of that road. She said them roads were useless on our property and that, you know, which they were. You know, I didn't need them. You don't need roads out to your hay fields and that, you know. But then I downsized already in cattle. I run 20 big head, and I'm down to 15 big head, because I had to go to another farm and rent a barn up there to do hay for what I lost, because I rated 800 bales of hay a season because of what they took off of my hay fields and that. So I'm 6 miles up the road doing another farm and rented their barn to put the hay in to compensate for what they did, you know. But the only thing it did was cost us money. Like my oldest son, my youngest son, he said, Dad, this just cost you money out of your own pocket. He said, they're the only ones that benefited, and which it is, you know. Because everything they did, it cost me money. I broke equipment because of what they did. They went up in the hayfield when they first come there, put stakes out in the field, one about this high and one about that high. I'm cutting through the hay, running along with a 9-foot machine. I hear bang, clang. I back up, raise the machine up, look underneath it. Here's pieces of wood went in the machine and took all the knives out of the machine in that. And I called him. I said, which one of you ignorant people put these stakes out in my hayfield? Oh, they got to do that where they're putting the well at. I said, nobody told me nothing. You know, they just snuck on the property, put these stakes out in the hayfield in hay that's this high, and I take the machine and bust the machine right up, you know. Then I blew a tire on that one front tire on the tractor, put a stake right up through it. It was sticking up in the edge of the field and that, and I put it right through the tire, you know. And so I had to buy the tire. I had to buy a cutter bar, which was a couple $100 a tire. I still didn't get the tire, put a spare tire on, which ain't no good. I got to buy a new tire this season. But it just, money after money, you know.
And you never signed the lease?
Yeah, I never signed a lease. It was a lease from 1921. This was a lease from 1921.
That was already part of your property.
Yeah.